The man put up 8 catches on 9 targets for 145 pass yards and 3 touchdowns. 3 tutties. I don't know who had this on their bingo card, but bingo. Welcome back to River City Rundown. Tonight marks the end of week 3, and today we're talking about the biggest studs and duds in fantasy football. Some players won people their matchups, and others, well, let's just say they tanked their chances. Today, we'll cover the top studs and the most disappointing duds and what it means for your fantasy team moving forward. Now, make sure you're following me on Instagram at rivercity_rundown for more fantasy football content. Now, let's get right into it. My first stud of week 3 has got to be Jonathan Taylor, running back for the Indianapolis Colts. He leads the league in rushing. The Colts are 3-0, and he is the workhorse of this entire offense. The offense runs through him. Now, at this time, Jonathan Taylor has just marked his second week in a row, totaling over 100 yards on the ground. Last week, he had 145. This week, he marked 102 on the ground with 3 touchdowns to match. At this point, I would say that Jonathan Taylor has the safest floor of anybody in fantasy football. He is truly a set-it-and-forget-it player for your lineup. He is running more routes than ever before in his career currently, and the Colts remain to have one of the better offensive lines in the league. At this point, Jonathan Taylor is the clear #1 fantasy MVP through 3 weeks of the season. And stud number 2 is Caleb Williams, quarterback of the Chicago Bears. The Bears looked good this weekend against the Cowboys. Williams threw 19 for 28 and 298 pass yards for 4 passing touchdowns. Ben Johnson was just having fun with the Cowboys. They threw a design flea flicker play that resulted in a touchdown in the second quarter, I believe, and it just looked like this was going to be a nightmare for the Cowboys early on. Dallas's defense never really stood a chance to begin with. Williams has looked really good this year. Ben Johnson is utilizing him in a way that he hasn't really been able to utilize Jared Goff in the past few years, using his legs more, design quarterback runs, scrambling out of the pocket, and still finding guys down the field. With Chicago having such a deep wide receiver room with DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, then you've got Colston Loveland, DeAndre Swift out of the backfield, there's just a plethora of options for Williams to choose from. Ben Johnson and this Bears offense, I expect them to be playing from behind quite often with the defense in the shape that they are, and that's going to leave more opportunities for Williams to have many more games with a similar stat line like he did this past Sunday. Caleb Williams looked really good, putting up over 29 fantasy points in this past Sunday's game. My third stud is Hunter Henry, the tight end of the New England Patriots. Now, Henry had 8 catches on 11 targets this past weekend against the Steelers. He totaled 90 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. I would say that at this point, Hunter Henry is probably Drake May's #1 target. The wide receiver room is a little bit confusing, not really knowing who to start, and the Pats do spread the ball around pretty evenly between all the receivers. Now, with the whole running back situation in the state that it's in currently, I do expect TreVeyon Henderson to start to inch his way closer to becoming that starting back, but as of right now, the one player I feel confident starting every single week has got to be Hunter Henry. In 2 out of the last 3 weeks, he's had over 60 receiving yards, and he seems to be Drake May's #1 target on a consistent basis. I would say Henry is going to continue to have games like this where he racks up multiple touchdowns. And the stud of the week is none other than, that's right, you guessed it, Trey Tucker. The man put up 8 catches on 9 targets for 145 pass yards and 3 touchdowns. 3 tutties. I don't know who had this on their bingo card, but bingo. He cracked 40.9 PPR fantasy points this weekend against the Washington Commanders. Catching 3 touchdowns is crazy, and one of them was a late bomb when Las Vegas was, I guess you could say, trying to mount their comeback. But, I mean, he was the leading fantasy scorer of the week by far. It wasn't very close. And I just did not expect him to go nuclear like this. Consider him as a waiver wire pickup this week. It was just one of those games where he was the guy that Geno Smith locked in on. It's unfortunate for those fantasy managers who have Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers and Ashton Genty, but there's going to be weeks like this in this Raiders offense where you just don't know who's going to get the ball. And this week, it was Trey Tucker's day. And to start things off with some of the duds this week, guys that we played and had bigger hopes for, but they just disappointed. #1 is none other than BTJ, Brian Thomas Jr. His stat line was 2 of 6 for 55 yards, and that may seem decent. He put up 7.5 fantasy points, but one of those catches didn't come until there was 2 minutes left in the game, and then went for 46 passing yards. So just put that into perspective. He was previously 1 for 5 for 9 yards until there was 2 minutes left in the game when he caught that 46-yard catch. I would say that at this point, Brian Thomas Jr. is the guy who you feel a little bit unsure about every single week with Trevor Lawrence as his quarterback. It's disappointing to see that the starting quarterback of the Jags is just not getting him the ball. It's not force feeding him. He's just had such a regression with Lawrence at the quarterback position. It's really disappointing, and I don't know how much longer it's going to go on for, but all those fantasy managers who use such high draft capital on Brian Thomas Jr. are punching air. And it's disappointing because with a guy with so much talent, the Jags just can't seem to get him the ball. I will say though, Shane Walden is the main guy I have to blame for all this. I mean, he leaves Seattle, Jackson Smith and Jigba goes off. He leaves, Chicago, Rome Odunze goes off. So maybe next year when he leaves Jacksonville, Brian Thomas Jr. will be back to his normal 1,000-yard season self. And my second dud of the week has got to be Ashton Jeanty, running back for the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, if you saw my last episode, I did have a bold prediction of Jeanty finally cracking the century mark and adding 2 touchdowns to match. Now, although that did not happen, there was a part of the game where I thought it was a very real possibility. Jeanty cracked 63 rushing yards on 17 attempts. Now, a little nugget of information to consider. On those 17 rush attempts, 11 of those attempts he was hit or touched in the backfield, which tells me one thing. The offensive line is atrocious. They're not creating any running lane for him to go through. They are not getting blocks. I mean, quite frankly, they're not giving him a chance. Now that mixed in with the terrible scheme that the Raiders have been running, he's not being utilized in the passing game. It would certainly help if he can catch at least 3 or 4 targets out of the backfield, but they're not using him in that regard whatsoever. I'm not telling you to trade him because you most likely used a first-round pick on him, but what I will say is that there's going to be some weeks where you might consider putting him on the bench. And at this point, until the Raiders show that they're going to use him as the pass-catching 3-down back that he has been and proved to be in college, got to be a little bit weary. Otherwise, you're going to continue to be in a position where you're playing from behind. And dud number 3 is Malik Nabers, wide receiver of the New York Giants. Now, it's not really Nabers' fault that he's on this list. He caught 2 of 7 targets for 13 yards, totaling 3.3 fantasy points. But he is at the expense of bad quarterback play. Russell Wilson is once again hot and cold. He's up and down, and unfortunately, until the mediocre play of the quarterback for the Giants changes, Nabers fantasy managers can expect weeks like this. Now, Jackson Dart did get a little bit of playing time, but I think that we're going to have to see Russell Wilson for a couple more weeks until Dart finally gets the opportunity. At this point, you drafted Nabers with the intention of playing him. I'm not saying he's going to go on your bench. This is just a bad week, and I think that the Giants are going to learn from it and bounce back. He's your star playmaker, the best playmaker and best player on your team. You've got to get him the ball. You've got to force feed him the ball. But as of right now, he ends up on this list. And the Dumpster Fire Award for Week 3 goes to Chase Brown, running back from the Cincinnati Bengals. 10 rush attempts for 3 yards. Now, he did reel in 4 or 5 targets for 17 yards, but things have looked abysmal for all playmakers in the Cincinnati offense since Joe Burrow went down. I will say I'm hitting the panic button, and I'm hitting it hard with Chase Brown. I don't have a lot of faith in Jake Browning whatsoever. I don't have a lot of faith in him getting his guys the ball, but I mean, it has looked bad. The offensive line that got Joe Burrow hurt is still the same offensive line protecting Browning, and still the same offensive line supposed to create running room for Chase Brown. At this time, I'm not saying you trade him because you might not be able to get what he's worth, but he's a guy that is going to be expendable, to say the least. An honorable mention for stud of the week, I've got Cam Skattebo. On 10 rush attempts, he totaled 60 yards, 6 catches for 61 yards, and a rush touchdown. I mean, his pass blocking was incredible. His trucking ability, and he was running over defenders all night. Cam Skattebo looked like the real deal once he finally got more playing time after the Tyrone Tracy injury. Cam Skattebo has got to be a lineup block at this point. With the Giants certainly going to use him and Nabers as their featured players in the offense, I'd say the Cam Skattebo time is now. An honorable mention of dud of the week is Calvin Ridley, wide receiver of the Tennessee Titans. It's been a rough first 3 weeks for the Titans, as their pass catchers have looked a little bit shaky so far, and Ridley, who was the clear-cut number 1 option on this team, has not been producing whatsoever. He's yet to crack 60 receiving yards in a single game this season, and with this past week, he had 1 catch for 27 yards, totaling 3.7 fantasy points. Now, a waiver wire guy worth considering picking up and stashing on your bench, with Ridley being in the duds category, has been Alec Eilmanor. The guy's caught 2 passing touchdowns in consecutive weeks. Now, at this time, he's not playable, but I think that he's worth stashing on the team just in case things change and the offense can finally get things going. He has appeared to have some chemistry with Cam Ward through 3 weeks, and maybe in the future, in 2 weeks, he can actually be playable. Alright, now I got a question for you guys. Who was your biggest dud of the week? Drop it in the comments or DM me on Instagram or TikTok, and I'll shout it out on next week's episode. Alright, and that's wraps for our Week 3 studs and duds. This week's stud of the week has got to be Trey Tucker with that 41 burger he put up this past Sunday. And our dumpster fire award goes to none other than Chase Brown. Thanks for listening to River City Rundown. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram and TikTok at rivercity_rundown for more fantasy football breakdowns. On the next episode, we'll be talking about some waiver wire pickups, guys that I think you should make a priority as you put your claims in heading into Wednesday morning. On Wednesday's episode, we'll be talking about some matchup previews as we head into Week 4. And on Thursday's episode, we'll talk about the starts and sits as we head into Week 4 and Thursday Night Football. Appreciate you listening, and we'll see you then.